There we go.
Yep, here we go.
All right. I'm going to call this meeting, the special meeting of the Board of Education to order. I want to start by thanking Ross for joining us this evening, Tracy, to discuss hourly wage. In our recent operations work group, we had a lot of conversations, including a conversation about an increase to the hourly wage of working here. I think that the ability to have a more expansive conversation about what all our options are in terms of the board making a unilateral decision to invest in our hourly folks or in our hourly folks in specific units strategically is part of why we're having this conversation this evening. I'm gonna turn it over to Ross to kind of, talk us through where we landed in operations and what our options are moving forward. And then I know Dr. Jenkins is preparing to bring a recommendation to the board forward later in the month. But if Dr. Jenkins can preview for us what that process will look like, give us the word and moving forward, and then we'll be able to have a discussion and questions before we adjourn. So without further ado, Ross, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, good evening, everybody. So at Operations Work Group on the 8th, we discussed the current proposal that we wanted to talk about regarding the $1.4 million that was in the June budget for this discussion. At the time, we had identified that the current proposal would include a $2 per hour schedule increase for the EA group for MMSD. Beyond that, I know there has been some questions regarding costs beyond that. But at this time, I do want to stress again, the $1.4 million is the only source we've identified for this discussion. And I've been in discussions with Dr. Jenkins and other members of administration on other ideas that we want to have in this discussion tonight. So beyond that, I will turn this over to Dr. Jenkins for further elaboration and discussion.
Thank you so much, Ross.
Yes, and thank you so much, Ross. And let me just say, first of all, Ross and the team have done so much work to get us to the point to get to the one point where I have to tell you that a lot of things that we've done looking inside, and we still have a lot of work, and we've been talking as an administrative team that we feel like we can do. And it's really, truly, and I want to say to all the board members, thank you for you allowing us to continue to work at this as a team. And I have to tell Board Member Vandermiller, thank you, because when we said the budget reflects our values and she questioned something, not in haste, but it was just raising the question about if it reflects our values truly. And I'll tell you, after we're looking at this as a team, we've been wrestling. It's not about just what we do. It's about how we do it and what we really value when you start thinking about our students having the best in front of them, the best talent, us having the best teachers, retaining them, recruiting them, all of our employees. That said, I think we also have to look at how we're being fiscally responsible to our taxpayers, and that matters. We think as a team, we want an opportunity to go back and continue to wrestle with this situation, and we think we have a path that we want to look at and bring that back to you in terms of what we feel like represents what we can do as a team for you to consider. So that saying, I would ask that we hold off on any voting here this evening and just give us a chance to come back with a recommendation that we would like to see put forth as a team.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jenkins. I see Board Member Vandermeulen.
Would we then vote on the 29th?
On the 29th is what we're striving to come back with. Yes.
Thank you for defining the timeline, Board Member Vandermeulen and Dr. Jenkins. Further discussion. Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Yeah, I guess my question is, August 29th is a week away and we get the materials on Thursday. I guess, when will we see any further recommendation? I'm a little concerned about not having an opportunity to discuss it as a board before we're expected to vote on it. So can you clarify that process a little bit?
Yeah, it was our hope to have, even if we need to have a special meeting before the meeting on the 29th for a final vote. And if you so deem that you want to have 29 for the discussion, I'll put that out to you. But our thing is to go back and look at it, how we can do it. We wanted to communicate with you before we put it out finally. But by Thursday, we're hoping that we can have some discussions ready for you. And if we want to do a special meeting before the meeting, final vote, that would be perfectly fine. But we definitely want to share it with the board first because we want to share it with you, the path. And I'll just go ahead and tell you right now too, I understand how we're gonna have to do our budget. We're gonna take more of the long view. This can't be an event. We gotta think about how we structurally are organized now. And if that's going to really get us to where we need to be, or do we need to start really thinking about a long view of how we go about budgeting in MMSD? That's what we are.
Further discussion? So I'll say this, I would be prepared on the 29th to vote for the $1.4 million in additional funding to increase the hourly wage for the units that we've identified for that funding specifically. I'll also say, I think that similar to Board Member Nichols, I think that there is some ability to explore fund balance in the ways in which we're using fund balance, especially at a time where our fund balance exceeds our board policy significantly. And so Ross, I want you to name, I guess, how much over our policy is our fund balance currently?
Apologies. We're still working on year end at this point, but it is currently projected will be above the 15% threshold. I don't have an exact number for you at this date, but we certainly are above the 15 as of the end of last year.
Are we at about 17%?
That's pretty close. Again, I don't want to give you a hard number until we finish the audit report, but that is accurate. We're going to be a little higher than what we projected back in June.
Okay, and I guess Ross, one of the things I think that is really, and that's it for my question for you. So thank you so much for clarifying. Do you know exactly when we'll know where we're going to land for fund balance?
Yes, I should have a preliminary report ready for October at the very latest, but the audit report will probably come back to the board in November with the auditors present.
Thank you so much, Ross. I guess the last thing I'll say in terms of fund balance in staff is I think one of the most important things we can do is invest in staff compensation. I think the reality is that we are not keeping up with inflation. I think that job security and our benefits package and the ways in which we invest in compensation both attract people to this district and keep people in this district. But I also think part of the conversation that we've been missing is the value of the work that people do. And I think that we sometimes forget how much goes into supporting our students and the needs of our young people, and how valuable the work folks do for this district is to us and the families that send their children to school here. And so I think I don't want to miss an opportunity to say that I think we not only need to talk about how we compensate people for their work, but also the value of this work and what it means to our ability as a district to serve young people. Board Member Nichols and then Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Thank you. So as I looked at the board memo that Ross prepared for tonight, there are a couple things that I think stand out for me. If we take the 1.4 and apply it to the SEA unit as we had previously discussed, Again, that would take kind of a current starting wage of $16.44 and increase it to $18.45. We also know that within that employee group, everybody isn't sitting at the starting wage. We do have employees who sit in other places on the salary schedule. So maximum rate would be $23.32, all the way back down to the $18.45 if we applied just the 1.39. And that's a $2 and something increase from where folks were just in June. So as I said at our operations work group, I actually feel like that gets that employee unit group in a much more competitive place, especially compared to our neighboring districts. And I was happy to see that. At the same time, I was one of the folks that was holding a question about whether we could do a little bit more. So when I look at the breakdown for the $3.50 an hour, again, just focusing on the EA/SEA unit, it looks like we would need an additional $1,030,630 to get to the 2.4. Is that correct, Ross? I did the math right?
If you're talking just about EA, yes, that is correct.
Okay. So I'm just kind of talking out loud. So let me just kind of, I don't know that I have an exact question yet, but let me just say this. So in my mind, I was thinking that if we just focused on the EA/SEA unit and we could add another $1,030,630 to get to that 2.4 that Ross had put in the chart, that would move that employee unit group to now a new starting wage of $19.94, just hovering under $20 an hour, cents below. And the highest paid employees in that group, the maximum rate would be $24.81. So to me, when I'm thinking about how we could potentially take dollars out of fund balance, still be financially responsible as a board, like not creating a huge cliff in the next funding year that we would have to address, we're gonna have to address anyway, and bring an equity lens to an employee group that we think needs more pay equity. I think for me, and I know Ross, your memo was just an illustration. I think getting closer to the $3 or $3.50 an hour actually gets that unit in a really, I don't know, like competitive place, as well as kind of gets us to that $20 an hour range. I know that Ross has already explained that we don't necessarily have more operating funds to meet this request, but I do think that $1,030,000 out of the fund balance, to me, even if we had to carry that for a couple of years in a row into our recurring fixed costs, I think we could make those adjustments. And I know that million would be on top of the 1.4 that we've already earmarked. So that was where my head was going. The one thing that still stands out to me as kind of an unresolved issue is that I want to see the EA/SEA unit have, the greatest kind of equity increase in pay as we can kind of responsibly afford. And I know that unit also includes nursing assistants. So they have a slightly different salary schedule that doesn't address clerical, it doesn't address food service or security. So I know in one of the breakdowns that Ross gave us, he kind of showed us if we applied the $2 an hour increase to all of the hourly units, that would come out to be a $3.3 million investment, and then that would create close to a $2 million kind of operating deficit. So, you know, I don't know. I think there are pros and cons to us focusing just on the EA/SEA unit. I also think that means there are other hourly employees who are critical to keeping our schools running that then wouldn't get that same boost. So, you know, I would be curious to hear what Dr. Jenkins' recommendations would include. But I've been trying to think about what I thought was our initial kind of commitment and interest was really around the EA/SEA unit because they've been harder to fill positions. They're critical to our school operations, our student impact. And if we came in closer to a $3.50 hour increase, that group would literally experience almost like, not exactly a $5 increase, but it would be pretty close because they were at $15.96 in June. And their new starting rate would be $19.94. So $4 increase for the kind of at the starting range of the scale. Ross, please correct me if you heard me misstate anything.
No, so far you're reading information in the memo, so I'm fine.
All right.
Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you, Board President Muldrow. I guess I'll just start out by saying that, you know, given the rise in inflation and the cost of living and everyday living expenses in Madison, I understand the desire to provide as much of an increase as we can for our hourly staff. Yet from my perspective, I feel like it's my responsibility as a board member to balance the district budget and be fiscally responsible in the context of what we have to spend, what our budget is projected to be for the year ahead. And we've talked about the difficulty of not having the state funding that we feel we need, and we can advocate going forward for change in the state's funding commitment, and I believe we need to do that. But we still have to work within the limits of what we're given right now. And from the memo that I'm reading for today's meeting, it's not recommended that we use fund balance in a way that would create a structural spending deficit. And so I guess what I'm thinking of is that a lot of what we're dealing with for the budget year ahead is that we still have uncertainty in the budget. And the costs that we're going to have from the inflationary increases that we're going to continue to see, transportation, and uncertainty with where we are in our enrollment, which we're not going to know until we get that third Friday count in September. And so it feels like there are still a lot of moving pieces. And so I understand the context of wanting to do an increase, but I'm just a little concerned about using fund balance to do that, because even fund balance going forward 1 or 2 years still creates a structural deficit and a drawing down of that, if that's where that's going to stay. And just knowing that we're going to have challenges going forward in the next budget cycle already to start with. That's where I'm at right now.
I saw Board Member Vandermeulen and then Board Member Simpkin.
I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but I'm gonna go anyway. I have worked on this board almost 6 years. This is probably the most productive union talking as a board we've ever done on having discussions, on actually discussing what we actually value and how to get there. That I appreciate. But we need to do the $5 an hour, or fiscal responsibility is great until we have no staff. Fiscal responsibility is great until we have no one who can make sure to clean up the schools at night because we can't pay the janitors or the food service people. And we can't have the SEAs unlock the classroom robots so that way they can have the kids participate in class. Those are all realities that can and do happen. I saw what happened with Sherman Middle School last year, because I went there. The amount of staff that had to miss due to COVID and other illnesses and could not be filled, where teachers and staff trying to wear themselves down into nothing to be able to fill jobs and positions. Can't have that this year. So I urge people to realize, I know fund budget sounds drastic. People always like to say, oh yes, you're a tax and spend. But you fund what works and you fund what's important. And in this case, without our staff, you don't have schools.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeer, Board Member Simpkin.
I want to go back to where we started, which is the comment around how the budget is a demonstration of our values. And for me, my values are that we are paying a living wage that respects the hard work that everybody who's employed with the district is doing. When it comes to the SEAs and the EAs, I keep thinking about what that ripple effect is for whether or not we have the best SEAs and EAs in our classrooms, the ones that have lots of experience, that have, had a chance to have years of professional development and that feel respected and want to stay. I have 2 stepchildren who are now adults, but throughout their whole childhood, they relied on EAs, SEAs in order to be able to be in class. And when I think about what the impact would have been on every other student in that class and the teacher, had there not been somebody there to support them, the whole system starts to crumble. And so I think that my values are about, paying people what they're worth and respecting them, but also in providing our students with the tools that they need in order to get a good education. And I don't think we can do that without having fully staffed classrooms with these assistants, these skilled, experienced assistants in the classrooms. And so, I think that my perspective is going to be, I lead my life in a very fiscally responsible way, and a lot of times that means I can't get what I want, and that's fine. But in this case, in particular, I don't know that we can function well as a school and provide quality education to every student without being able to fully staff this unit. And I think that, to me, is trumping everything else. And so we need to do what we can to increase the salary enough that people know that we are appreciating them, that they want to come to MMSD from other districts, and that the people who are here feel good about the work they're doing. That's where I'm at.
Dr. Jenkins and then Board Member Nichols.
I'd just like to say that yes, a lot of what's been said. This is the part that I've just really wrestled with when I think about what we really want to be, not just where we are and where have we been. It's been a constant conversation we're wrestling with in terms of being fiscally responsible is what we have to do. Have we gone deep enough? I ask myself, have I gone deep enough in the couple of years I've been back to look at some of the structural issues that we do have that we're going to have to address head on to make sure that we are retaining, we're recruiting, and we're able to sustain what we need to do in having the staffing that we need to have for our children. And in doing that, I think, talking to the team, we have a path that we're gonna go back and look at it. It may be encompassing of a few things. I think in the short run, I hear that in terms of where we are, but it's not just the short run, it's the long run, so that we don't have to continue to come back to this. We don't look at ourselves deeply internally. It doesn't matter what the referendums are, we'll still be back at the same conversation. But I do say, and I said again, I cannot say anything without saying it. The zero and zero disinvestment in education is a shame. It makes you, as a district, have to make a decision between what's right and what's right. We want the best for all of our children. So we have to have the best staff to be able to do that. And when I look around at our staff who work here, who can't even live here, that's hard. Some of the people that we're depending on to do the most work. So I am willing to work with our staff to go back and see how we can come back forward. What Ross has laid out is a truth. We have a cliff coming and we don't have much operating the way that we do right now. I think we can sustain ourselves. We'll be right back here at this conversation again. So that's what I'm putting out, and I'm saying, I'm asking that we not have any vote again and give us a chance to come back with a path forward that can get us to one point, and then we're taking a long view about what we need to do.
So I see Board Member Nichols and then Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. I'm gonna add myself to the deck. Board Member Nichols?
Yeah, thank you for your remarks, Dr. Jenkins. And again, I want to thank Ross for all of the extra work that he's been putting in to lay out real numbers for us and kind of real impact. I know that you just said that you're going to take it back to the team. You're going to work on it. I am curious if, and you may not feel like you're in a position to say yet, but do you believe that one of the paths forward is really focusing on the EA-SEA unit? Or are you talking about more broadly, Dr. Jenkins, kind of looking at all of the kind of hourly employees or just compensation overall?
I am looking broadly for sure.
Okay.
But I'm also looking intentionally at what we're doing and what we have done as a society with our lowest paid employees, all of them.
Mhm.
You know, we're going to continue to perpetuate that, or we're going to step out in a way and think deeply about the harm that that caused. When I think about who's in that lowest group, it's just like teachers. The reason we have a national teacher education problem right now is a gender issue. It is a shame, and the country needs to face that. We used to have 200,000 degrees confirmed back in 1970, now less than 90, because women are the heads of the household and they have to go get other jobs because we don't value education from the federal level to the state level. And then the local have to pick it up. So I'm looking at the food service, I'm looking at everything in terms of our custodial, our security, all of it. We need to have a broader picture that when we take the long view. But we also have to look at, are we realistic and have things changed to where we have to structurally begin to think about how can we do this and show value, and we need to bring in the collective in terms of how do we really compare to others. And if we want to be that district that retain, recruit staff, it's got to be all encompassing. It just can't be a single item that we take at a time. We need to go ahead and deal with it and not kick the can down the road and just be about what we need to be about, and that's human decency, in my estimation. Complicated.
Yes, and I appreciate the comprehensiveness and kind of needing to look at how we are compensating and supporting staff kind of as a holistic view. So I appreciate that. And I also feel like there's some immediacy, right? Because we have the 1.39 million right now already earmarked, ready for a board unilateral decision. And I think the question from my perspective is, are we willing to move on that? Or are we also willing to look at some amount from our fund balance that could help fund a different amount? Because I know that Ross has not identified any other revenue sources for us to use. So I think where I'm leaning is more trying to go closer to the 3.5, the $3.50 an hour. I mean, we'll wait for your, obviously we'll wait for your recommendation as well. Using fund balance for that amount. And then right now, I feel like that would be a focus on the EA SEA unit, which doesn't address all the other employee groups. So there'd still need to be a more comprehensive conversation, because once you move some folks up and do right by them, you're leaving others out. And so the consequence for us is that it then perpetuates further inequities, and then other employees feeling like they're not valued. So, we have to be, I think, thoughtful. But I thought that the EA SEA unit was a group that we thought was really critical for our students, hard to fill, and that we wanted to make that position as fairly compensated and attractive from a hiring perspective and a retention perspective as possible. So that's I'm just reiterating what I already said. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Nichols. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, thank you. And I agree with the valuing it again and wanting to invest in our employees, but I am very curious about this concept of, once you start leapfrogging one group over another in the hourly wage and looking forward, if we're going to use fund balance this year to do that and put ourselves in a structural deficit, then we're not going to have as much to even start the conversation next year to fix the rest of the group, right?
Yeah.
And so that's one of my concerns with overextending ourselves this year, is that we put ourselves in a position where we can't have those more comprehensive conversations going forward as we try to figure that out. I guess, again, going back to the timeline for us doing this, I would be very comfortable with voting on that 1.4 million that we have designated already next week, and then hearing the recommendation, if there is one going forward, and addressing that separately so that we can move forward on what we already have as a proposal in front of us. I guess another thing that just sort of popped into my head is that thinking of the HR discussions we've had, and looking at the exit surveys, and I know that was a very small sample size. But, the reason compensation wasn't the top thing why people were leaving, it was working conditions and, things like that. And so I think it has to be a more expansive conversation around that at some point too.
In fairness though, Chris, the sample size on the exit surveys was so small.
Yeah.
I don't know that.
That would be valid. Okay.
I don't know that.
It just popped into
I
my
would say
head
we're
as
moving away from what we're noticed to discuss tonight in
Okay.
terms of exit surveys. So I appreciate the comment, Chris, but I want us to stay on topic in terms of the notice that we gave tonight to the community about what we're talking about.
Yep, that's fair. And I think, as we are looking at it, and as the memo stated tonight, it is the whole package, the hourly wage plus the benefits that we give and how our benefits compare to other districts, which I think we have a very strong benefits package as far as what we are requiring, our employees to contribute, and the number of employees that are even half-time that we give full benefits to. That is a huge investment by our district,
Yeah.
and something that I think has to be considered in the larger conversation going forward as well.
Thank you so much, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. I feel like what I'm going to say is going to come across as pretty strongly worded. And I don't mean this to attack anybody, but I fall in greater alignment with what some of my fellow board members have said tonight than with what other board members have said. And so what I'll say is, I don't like the framing that fiscally responsible is paying some people a poverty wage. I don't like that as the framework for how to be responsible. I also think that if we have a series of vacancies that we cannot fill, that are generating savings, and we used that generation of savings to pay people bonuses last year, that we have to acknowledge that we are struggling as a district to attract and retain people into our district. I think saying, hey, we want to have a competitive wage and be comparable to our surrounding areas is a really strategic thing to do. But I think saying, hey, we want to lead on compensating people well, I think that's a very different thing to say. And I would love to see us at a place where nobody in MMSD is making less than $21 an hour. Now, do I know realistically that we're not going to get there because we have a state budget that gave us a 0% increase? Absolutely. But I think what people have to trust is that when we can, we are investing to the greatest possible extent in our staff. Everything is rising in price. We don't get to go to the gas pump and say, sorry, MMSD can't afford this, so we're gonna pay you less. We don't get to do that with anybody else. So the idea that our staff, that their labor is more valuable, that they need to keep up with inflation. And I wanna thank the folks who have come to public comment and said, listen, we'd love for you all to get us to 4.7, but what is more important than that is making sure that the folks who are the most impacted by inflation, the folks who are the most devastated, the folks who are seeing their rent raised, the folks who are having the most difficulty putting gas in their tank, that we do something for those folks. And so I think this conversation is incredibly important. And I think that there are multiple ways that we can look at responsibility in this conversation. Who and what are we responsible to? And I think if we are not responsible to the people who work for us, then we're not being responsible. Board Member Simkin.
I think that this is the first conversation, or this should be the first conversation of many, around looking at all of the categories of individuals within the district that are not making enough money to live in Madison. And so to me, this is a beginning about really digging deep soon into our budget and the way that we spend money, and making sure that it truly reflects our values, and that we are being responsible in making sure that every dollar that we're spending is most effectively supporting our students. And so I recognize that there is this uncomfortableness around the idea of picking one category of employee and not evenly distributing it. And I agree, this is uncomfortable, but I think it is a starting point, and that we can, if we're in alignment, we can move forward with looking at all of the employees that are not making a livable wage, and start to readjust how we're spending money. I believe this is just a start.
Thank you, Board Member Simkin. Board Member Gomez-Schmidt.
Yeah, I'll say this is a start to a conversation going forward. I mean, I'm looking forward to Dr. Jenkins, your recommendations coming forward. And I think we do have to recognize that we have already approved a budget for this coming year. We have approved a budget that started on July 1st. We're going to be talking about our cash flow borrowing in September. We are, doing the final budget approval in October, and people have signed contracts and are already working for us, right? So we have less room to maneuver, I think, in this budget. But I will look forward. I think the structural conversations are going to take more time than we have before October. I mean, our finance office has to get this budget worked out so that they can have a final budget for us to approve in October. And so just thinking of it again, I don't want to come across by saying fiscal responsibility means shortchanging our staff. That's not what this is about. We have made a tremendous investment in our staff with 3% base wage increase and average 2% steps and lanes, and this extra, $2 an hour investment in our EAs and SEAs. I think we are valuing this, and I know we want to go further, but I really do feel we have to do that and figure out how to do that in a way that we're not putting ourselves in a worse position for next year. So
Thank you
that's,
so much for speaking to that, Board Member Gomes-Schmidt.
thank you.
Board Member Vandermeulen.
Yes, just want to say, I understand the work that Ross has put in and this budget has been put in. I get that. But there's a reason we call it a temporary and a preliminary budget. Because it is just that, preliminary. Our income from April to June, from April when we first met to July went up because of the close of a TID by over $11 million. Things do happen at different times. I'm not saying that's normal. I am saying things change, amounts change. What doesn't change is the needs of the people that we work with and we work for. I'm not saying we should defund the district, obviously. I'm not wanting to break the bank. What I am saying is I need to pay the people who've been there since the start more than what we're doing. And 3% isn't going to cut it, especially when not everyone gets that 3%.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Board Member Nichols.
Thank you. Ross, just so I'm clear in my head, if we were to take the $1,030,600, whatever my math is, you're the math guy. If we were to take that out of fund balance, what percentage is 1 million to the fund balance, roughly?
If you give me a second, I can get that for you. I don't have that calculated, but give me a minute.
Okay, thank you.
Is a human calculator?
I want to
Very
guess
cool.
that it's 2%, but I guess not of the fund balance or overall budget. And fund balance would be at 15% of the budget, so.
I just want to make sure I'm saying that this is really complicated. And everything that's been said has been needed to be said. And I think us coming together and working together, we can get to a very special place, but it's not going to be easy. The structural pieces I'm mentioning, Board Member Simkin, you were starting to say that over there. That's real. That's how we sustain our budget and we retain our staff, we recruit staff. And I think we have to look at that too. We have done some things in investment so far in staff during these tough times. But we have to take a real long view. We have to deal with the immediate, but we're gonna have to look longer in order to be able to sustain it.
So I think Ross came back on to answer
Oh,
Board
yes.
Member Nichols' question, and then I see Board Member Gomes-Schmidt, and I'll add myself to the deck.
Just for round numbers, 1% fund balance is roughly just over $5 million. So 1 million would be about 0.2% for fund balance.
Okay. So 0.2%.
Correct.
Thank you, Ross.
Board Member Gomes-Schmidt.
Yeah, I guess my question again is for Ross in dealing with the fund balance. Is there anything from the April and June preliminary expenditures that, I guess the question is there anything else you're predicting that we may have to spend fund balance for or invest in, given how inflation has continued to go up and expenses may be going up?
Short answer, yes. I do think that we've already had discussions this spring about the trajectory of the 2020 capital maintenance referendum. I do think at some point we're going to have a conversation, especially at year end this year, 22, 23, regarding what we want to identify of expenses through fund balance to help get that inflation back under control. We do have some other one-time sources of funding that we're going to be utilizing to address some of that inflationary cost. TID revenues being one of them. We've already included that into the April and the June budgets, which the board has already seen. There is another TID closing next spring. I don't have the number in my head, but that will give us also some more flexibility to address the inflationary costs. But we will need to continue to have ongoing discussions about that. As far as other reasons why we might want to use fund balance between now and 10 years from now, any large scale one-time investment that would require remediation from the board and the district to address is where I would hold fund balance and reserve. But I can't give you an example. So if we were to have a catastrophic loss due to storm damage that for some reason wasn't covered by insurance, those are the types of things you want to spend one-time money on to get back on track.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much for that question, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt. I'm going to direct my question at Ross as well. This spring, we saw districts across the state, including Green Bay, which you illustrated during a meeting as an example, saying we're willing to create a structural deficit in order to invest in staff. In part because folks anticipated the staffing shortage we're experiencing now. Why are other districts more willing to position themselves to go to referendum, more willing to create a structural deficit to invest in staff than MMSD is?
Well, first I'll say I don't think that that's the only reason other districts have followed the path about using one-time money for investment in other areas. I do know from talking to my colleagues around the state, some of them are focusing purely on short-term solutions because they're anticipating either a return or a investment from the state. I don't share that thought with some of my colleagues. Others have used ESSER for the same reason. Again, hoping that in 2 years, there's going to be a bridge from that magical cliff we know we're headed towards. I don't have that level of confidence right now based on the last 10 years of state budgets that that's going to happen. The revenue limit didn't even exist the last time inflation was this high. So the idea that the state is going to work within the existing formula to write the state budget in future years, I think is going to be more of a Titanic turn than a speedboat turn. And it's between now and then, I think there's going to be a serious drain on local resources, especially in the districts that chose to use one-time money in that fashion.
Thank you so much for clarifying that, Ross. I think it's an area in which there's some tension around, why we are positioned differently than other districts. And I also do want to acknowledge that we did the largest increase in terms of COLA. This board invested more in COLA than we have in the last, decade and a half. And we did that at a time we saw, a zero increase from the state. So I think, I can't take for granted, Ross, all the work that you've done and continue to do to prioritize compensation, to prioritize uplifting our staff. And simultaneously, I think, getting to that space of doing enough to do right by the people who work for us is really complicated given this current climate. So I appreciate your work and thank you for that clarification. Any further discussion? Dr. Jenkins, I see your hand.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. My colleagues and I have been talking around the state, and there are some who share the same thought. Ross and I share the same thought that one-time monies, the ESSER dollars were not a good way to balance or pay your employees. In fact, I've been known for saying that those dollars can actually destabilize your budget, gives you a false sense of what's to come. Ross has taken a strategic action to make sure that we were in good shape, even as better shape as we could be in, having received the 0 and 0. So we're not relying on those ESSER dollars. And I still stand by that. The ESSER dollars are not a way to go. Some of my colleagues have done it for different reasons. They've done it, and I won't value any kind of way. But I'll say what we're doing, Ross is known by other superintendents and other CFOs as having taken some great positions of where we are and putting us in the shape that we're in. So I just want to say that he's done a lot of work and the team has done a lot of work too with him. So thank you, Ross. I wanted to say that publicly.
I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you very much, Dr. Jenkins, for speaking to that and highlighting the work of Ross and his team. Board Member Nichols.
Yes, my final comment is I just want to acknowledge that Dr. Jenkins, you have attracted, maybe even personally recruited folks to come to MMSD. And many of those folks have, have represented a more diversity in MMSD, which has been a great thing to see. And I'll just put it out there. When we are attracting kind of high quality, highly educated folks who are coming into MMSD from other places, I know that we look to pay them well. There's got to be a reason why somebody would move from this state to here or leave a district to come here. And when they're in an administrator role, somehow we find a way to make sure that their salary is attractive, right? And that they can make that new adjustment here in Madison as well as within the district. And so the same way that we're able to find the dollars to create a very attractive salary for a new leader coming into the district, I think we need that same bottom-up approach. And I don't mean bottom meaning our hourly employees are at the bottom. I mean, as we're thinking about folks in a system and where they land in the system, we just want to be able to value folks who are in the hourly role as well, right? And I know that I've also heard you express that as something that you feel like we really need to address. So I just wanted to say that I do think it's looking at all employees and going above and beyond for the employees who are doing really hard work in our schools. We can't operate really without them very well. And if we can take some of the fund balance, I'm not talking about a huge amount, but applying it towards what we have already earmarked, I think that could potentially go a long way with at least one of our employee groups.
Thank you so much, Board Member Nichols. I think I want to establish what we're doing in terms of next steps moving forward. And so what I'm hearing is we don't have a recommendation that gets us beyond the 1.4 million for the EA group at this time. That being said, I expressed at the beginning of this conversation that I am comfortable voting at the end of the month on that 1.4 million. I think the folks who are in that role deserve to know starting this year that they are going to see a significant pay increase and that this board is going to continue to work as hard as we possibly can in alignment with our administration to increase the ways that we are investing in our hourly staff. I think this is a first step. It's not the only step. But for me, I'm prepared to vote on that 1.4. I'd like to hear from the rest of the board if folks are confident in voting on that portion at the end of the month, this month. So I'm going to start with Board Member Simpkin. Yes. Board Member Nichols.
As a final vote with no other considerations or?
No, as an initial vote, and then once we get the proposal, being able to examine that and vote on that separately.
Come back to me.
Okay, Board Member Gomez-Schmidt,
Yes.
Board Member Vandermeulen.
Yes, though I would be willing to vote for the whole thing, and may I make a comment?
Yes.
Miguel Cardona in an interview on Sunday talked about using the American Rescue Plan dollars to fund the teacher exodus and the teacher shortage, saying it was a necessity to solve the teacher crisis problem. It's on CBS News.
Thank you for sharing that. Board Member Vandermeulen. Board Member Nichols, I'm going to come back to you.
Back to me now?
Yeah, like we made it.
So, I mean, I agree. I do want to close the loop on at least the 1.4. However, I still want to hear the possibility of using, based on my math, an additional $1 million from fund balance to increase that hourly amount up to $350 for the EA SEA group. So I don't know if that is, I don't know where that would sit, and I see Ross's hand is up.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if you were calling me or board member Mulder was going to call me or not. Sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ross. Go ahead. My apologies.
I would just have a clarifying question based on what was just stated. Trying to plan my fall for the budget approval. I know we have to make in October. Is it the intention to, if we were to go on the path that you just suggested, Board President Muldrow, and act on the 1.4 and then continue discussions, would the expectation be to incorporate any further changes in the October vote? Or would this be something that we would have to address after budget approval?
So Ross, I really appreciate that question. And I think the thing about that question is, I think we need to create a collaborative timeline between the board and the administration. So obviously, we can't make a decision without your recommendation and without you adjusting the budget to accommodate Dr. Jenkins' recommendation. So if you say, hey, at the end of the month, we're fully prepared for you all to vote on the 1.4. However, in order to talk about an additional increase to hourly wages, I ask that you give us until October to really see where we land in terms of enrollment, to really allow for us to have a very clear picture when we bring that proposal around additional investment in hourly folks to the board. Not to throw your question back at you, but I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
I guess from where my head's at, I'm just concerned about the timeline, about getting those documents and information prepared in time for that vote, rather than just, forgive the term, shoehorning it in at the last minute, because recalculating all those wages takes quite a bit of time. And if we're going to act on a recommendation from the administration or the board, frankly, I just want to know when I can expect to receive that final information, because I'm already behind getting that calculation started, is I guess where I'm at.
Board Member Nichols.
So I wonder, Dr. Jenkins, do you think that the proposal that you would be bringing forward next week would include some hourly wage projections or analysis? Or is it a more, it's more of a comprehensive proposal around kind of strategy and timeline moving forward? The reason I'm asking is I feel like if there's a recommendation or a proposal coming forward from you that actually includes a newly updated hourly wage proposal, I think it would be cleaner for us to do one vote on kind of a final set of a final hourly wage than to do like a vote next week and then maybe something else by October.
So I would say that it's not that I disagree with you, Board Member Nichols, it's that I feel prepared to invest the 1.4 and I don't feel prepared to do anything with the proposal because I haven't seen the proposal. So I feel like
It's a timing issue.
yeah, so I think just being ready, so I definitely agree it would be simpler to do it all at once. And I feel like you know that I am similarly interested in investing fund balance this year and then, you know, looking to next year to really kind of figure out how we sustainably invest at a greater scale in hourly folks. Yeah, I guess I would say that's kind of where I stand. And then Dr. Jenkins, if you want to answer Board Member Nichols' question, Board Member Vandermeulen, I see your hand.
Yeah, actually, I'm in agreement. And then you just heard what Ross said too. If we're going to do this, in particular, now we've opened the door up to say to vote next week on the 1.4, which we've all been having discussions about and know that we're there.
Right.
Then when we come back, it gives two things. One, Ross really time to do it because he's trying to balance two things here. And that budget must be ready in October, right? But it also gives us time to have more discussion about a clear path forward to get us where we need to be. And I would much rather be a little bit a lot more comprehensive for you and giving you time to digest it, see it before we get to the final vote.
So could we aim for a recommendation from you, Dr. Jenkins, as it pertains to any additional increase for hourly folks by the September operating work group?
Yes, that would be a good timeline. Sorry.
Board Member Gomes-Schmidt, does that work for you?
Yeah, that does. And my question for Ross would be then a vote would come after that on the 19th, our regular board meeting
Oh,
is
we're moving
earlier
that.
in the month.
We moved that today to the 27th.
Oh, I did not know
I
that
don't know
yet.
that that's been,
If-
Okay,
I don't think that's been officially decided.
okay.
Oh.
So I guess my question for Ross is the end of September
Some coming here.
enough time for something like that, or would we need a special meeting earlier in September to make sure that those calculations, that it gives you enough time? I know Ross have said you're already behind, and so I want to be realistic about the ask of you in creating a final budget for us.
Honestly, I'm not sure. Depends to the degree at which we go beyond. Again, if we're using fund balance, the funding source would be producing an unbalanced budget. But I think everyone knows that. So the sooner the better, but depending on how far we go and which units are affected, it would take considerable time. Just for reference, it takes me about 3 to 4 weeks to rebalance an entire budget, especially a budget this size. So if that's where we're headed, I will plan accordingly, but it will be tight. It'll be very tight.
Yeah, I guess I would not be interested in making you wait until the end of September to figure that out. I don't think that that's necessarily a good idea. So, but again, this is hard in the context of not knowing if there's another recommendation coming forward, or the recommendation is going to be to just go forward with what we already have for this year. I feel like I need more information. Yeah.
Board Member Vandermeulen?
One, sorry, I thought the date was changed. I apologize for causing confusion on that. Two, I never thought I would say this in my ever lovely life, so please do not quote me. I'm willing to say I trust you enough to finish the plan that I can vote on it on the 29th. That doesn't mean I'll vote for it. It means I can vote on it. This is a concession I'm willing to make because I don't think our teachers can wait.
So what I'm hearing from you, Nikki, is you're saying you want to vote at the end of the month of
Yes.
August for the $1.4 million
I'd rather
investment.
vote for the whole thing.
Wait, right now, you're saying you're
Yes.
willing to vote on the 1.4 at the end of August, and then you would be interested in the additional recommendation coming through operating and then voting on it at our regular meeting in September.
If we can't put them all together, then yes. If we can put them all together, also, then I'd be okay with that too.
Okay. Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Any further discussion or questions for administration? Board Member Nichols.
Okay, let me make sure I'm tracking. So we meet next week. The proposal at this point is to go ahead and take the 1.39, which we're calling 1.4, close the loop on that and take the vote. That would immediately, well, not immediately, that would then allow the staff to start the processing required for the EA/SEA unit, so that that new $2 an hour increase would go into effect. Okay, then in the meantime, we're saying that the administration will continue to work on a proposal that will then come to us in September.
During the
Time.
operating work group.
The operations work group that we could then vote on in October. So okay, so I'm not tracking.
You'd vote September.
So we would vote on that in
Regular.
September. So I think where my concern is, yes, I want to get the 1.4 established. We know that we've committed to investing that in the EA/SEA unit. My concern is I am still looking for additional on the hourly rate.
Same.
So I don't know where that proposal is coming. And the timing of that. Do you know what I mean? Cause then it seems like we're doing like one vote and then we're coming back 30 days later and maybe doing another vote on. I don't know, that feels like confusing to me, but maybe it's not. So I guess I'll say I'll defer to whatever the recommended process would be.
Can we get a suggestion by like that?
So I want to clarify that I see board member Gomez Schmidt's hand and then board member Vandermeulen.
I was just talking aloud, never mind. I withdraw.
I'm sorry, board member Gomez Schmidt, were you raising your hand?
I just saw Dr. Jenkins' hand, so I was hoping he might have some clarification. Board member Nichols' question.
Okay, one, I think when board member Gomez Smith asked the question of Ross and he said 3 weeks, we want to bring forth a good recommendation, a great recommendation. I think in trying to get the budget in and changing the schedules and then HR and Ross, I would like to go back and have a discussion with the team tomorrow and give you a recommendation of what we see as a realistic timeline for us to bring you all the information that you're gonna need so we can share it with you. You can look at it. And it just won't be one recommendation there. It'll be two so you can see them. And then taking that timeline, but still going with the 29th, the 1.4, which I think we've had beat that up a lot. Go with that. And then we come back with the other part of looking at what we think is a clear path to get to another level for us. That's what I would like to do. But I want to make sure that I'm giving Ross, because we got to have that in by October, that one piece. But as long as we know we're working on that, let us come back with you and do that. Today is, so, sorry, I'm losing my days. So, and I can speak to you and give it back to everybody in writing what we're thinking about by Wednesday.
I see board member Nichols. I want to acknowledge board member Gomez Schmidt that you're on deck, and then go back to Nichols because it's her question originally.
Yes. So, okay, I don't know how to say this without, I hope this doesn't come across the wrong way. Technically, the board can make a unilateral decision.
Yes.
It is best for us to make an informed decision, which is why we would want, in my mind, Ross to run the numbers, for you all to work, you know, Dr. Jenkins, get your team kind of pulled together on a couple of different options and to come forward, right? So I can't speak on behalf of the board. I can only speak for myself. I guess I just want it to be known that whatever proposal you're coming back with, I really need it to include a pathway that includes more than the $2 an hour, but within some reason. And reason and reasonableness is up for interpretation, but I shared tonight my thinking, okay, of taking approximately 1 million out of fund balance, adding that to this 1.4, that would get us to like a $3.50 hour increase for the EA/SEA unit. And I think that the $1 million deficit that would create, we can find a way to, I don't want to say sustain that, but adjust to that easier than some of the other options. That's just my own opinion. So I think what I'm hoping is that when you come back with some proposals, we already, it includes some other options. And I know that's a lot of work for Ross, but otherwise I feel like my vote next week on the 1.4, if I don't see the other piece coming later, I don't know how I would be able to, I wouldn't be able to go back and I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah, I
It's
think
voting in faith. It's, you know what I mean? It's a good faith vote.
Remember Vandermeulen's day,
Yeah.
which I recorded.
Mhm.
She said she trusts us.
I know.
So
Did you, when seconds like, did you hear that? Exactly. Yes, thank you.
I want to acknowledge that Board Member Gomez Schmidt, and then I see Board Member Simkin, and then Board Member Vandermeulen, and then I'd like to ask a question of HR about when this is gonna start to show up on people's paychecks, depending on how and when we vote. So Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge that our CFO has come to us with a pretty detailed memo today recommending that we do not use fund balance in this manner. And so from my perspective, I think maybe one of the recommendations that might come forward after discussion is that we, again, don't use fund balance in this manner, right? And then the board, obviously, like Board Member Nichols indicated, would decide on that. And so I guess, again, I feel like I don't have all the information and necessarily know what all the possibilities are, but I know a tremendous amount of work has gone into creating this budget and to get us to this point. From an urgency and from looking at needing to make sure we have a finalized budget for October, now I'm sort of leaning towards we need to figure this out more quickly and not sort of leave it in suspense until our regular meeting in September. So I guess my suggestion would be whatever we're gonna do going forward, let's
Expedite the
move
process.
with some sense of urgency here, which I know we have been. But yeah, that would be my comment on that.
Thank you, Board Member Gomez Schmidt. Board Member Simkin.
I also want to address timeline, and I want to respect the fact that Ross just said it takes him 3 to 4 weeks to calculate these numbers, which is a tremendous amount of time, and we're potentially asking him to do it twice in really close succession. And so the August 29th date, which I just said was, I would vote on it then, is also a self-imposed timeline that we've created. And I'm wondering if we can try to hold off for an extra week, maybe extra 2 weeks, and have a complete package that involves Dr. Jenkins' proposal, that we know we've got the 1.4 million, so that we can vote on it all at the same time and have a complete view of what we're working on, and Ross only has to calculate it all at once. So I'm starting to backtrack a little bit. I don't, the longer we talk about this, the more we're gonna start to talk in circles.
I know.
But I don't know that we have to wait for several weeks to do the finalized vote either. I would mind a special meeting on it once we have the whole package together. So that's where I'm landing at this moment in time.
So I can commit to scheduling a special meeting as soon as the proposal is ready, although what I would want to understand is, would folks rather have a special meeting than talk about this in the operating room?
I'd rather have the special meeting.
Well, when is the operating work group in, let me see, September?
Too dang late.
So I'm like, Laura, I want to acknowledge what you just said, and I also want to move on to Board Member Vandermeulen because her hand's been up for a little bit.
I apologize, Laura.
I think you need kind of the whole board to weigh in, and I think that might be some work that we're gonna have to start to do offline. But I see Ross's hand, I see Board Member Vandermeulen's hand, and I see Board Member Gomez Schmidt's hand. I do want to say, after Board Member Vandermeulen, I want to direct a really specific question at HR. Board Member Vandermeulen?
Yes, I prefer everything on the 29th. However, I would be fine with the special meeting no later than the 6th. Because after our meeting on the 6th, because I think that would be doable on everything. I think that people shouldn't go very far in the school year without knowing what they're getting paid. I think that's absolutely a necessity. Ross, I don't want to kill you. I really don't. That is not my modus operandi, so please forgive me, but I'm going to ask something anyway. And that is, can you please also show me a path for the $5? I know that this is going to be difficult. I get that. I realize I am a demanding diva. Thank you in advance. I delivered nice Christmas presents, I swear. But I need that, sooner rather than later. We got a lot of teachers and a lot of SEAs who are already talking to Sun Prairie. I know at least 6.
Thank you so much for your remarks, Board Member Vandermeulen. Tracy Carradine, I want to ask you specifically in terms of HR. Are you all prepared for the board to invest the additional $1.39 million in hourly staff in our EA group? If so, when would that increase show up on people's paychecks? So we're about a week and a half out from the first day of school. Would folks be receiving that rate of pay the day school opens?
No. So what you're talking about, it would take till about October 21st, depending on when you put it together, because we're talking like 168 records. We're talking over almost 700 records or moving pieces that we would have to touch to get it in place. Not only that, but working in tandem with Ross. So what he would do once he stops, then we'd have to take over. So it's like it's very interlocked in the work that we'd have to do. So it would take some doing.
So even though we've kind of talked about the commitment of the 1.4 million for the EA group, we're not actually prepared or in the position to roll that out, even if we vote on it next week, until October.
Correct.
I saw Ross's hand and then Board Member Gomez Schmidt's hand.
So not to add more complexity to this discussion, but as my wheels are turning, I do want to highlight one other thing. I don't want the decision about this to be a hasty decision, but I do share the kind of desire for urgency on some of this, because the other thing that we're talking about in September is our cash flow borrowing. So depending on what impacts we address here, there's a potential it could impact how much we need to borrow a month from now. Now, I don't think that it would cause us to go into negative cash positions in January, but it's something that I have to get in the space, because if we make a significant move, we may end up having to borrow more money than we originally intended. So again, putting that in the space, because we're going to talk about that in briefings, in operations work group in September, and voting on it and issuing bonds at the end of that month, because we will be out of cash at the beginning of October operationally.
Ross, thank you so much for helping us to anticipate that component of this, making sure we're thinking about the variety of factors that impact this decision. Board Member Gomez Schmidt.
Yeah, it was just from a timeline issue again, and I'm trying to figure out how to be flexible in our process here, but also urge us to stick to the board protocol that we have for the way our meetings operate. I mean, we have it set up for us to vote at regular meetings for a specific purpose, because everything else flows from that. And so I guess I will put it back to Dr. Jenkins that if there is a way for you to get us what we need by Thursday, I would really like to see something solid by then, so that we're ready for August 29th.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I was gonna call you Board Member Jenkins. Dr. Jenkins.
Yeah, I think by the 29th, it's not gonna be, other than what we had come to initially do, the 1.4. If you're talking about something comprehensive, but regarding all that we've talked about tonight, Thursday memo would not reflect that. I think the timeline that Chair Moldrick has started laying out, and I respect all of the things, and Ross is the CFO, and he really knows the workflow. And then in terms of how we have our meetings, and I think the 6th will still be a little short. I know that we have to get things done, but more the 12th or a special meeting in there.
I could see the 12.
Yeah, that will give Ross more time to do what he needs to do in the team. And I really need to have that time, that conversation with our team, being HR and finance, and just our team together tomorrow. And then I can get you that memo coming out that will be normal. The normal Thursday memo will come to you and laying out what I'd like to see happen for us though. But I just appreciate even this discussion, and have to go back to the one piece. This is short term now. We're gonna have to have a long-term discussion, which will include a structural discussion. That's what I'm saying. And so all of what you said tonight has been so rich in terms of the discussion that we're gonna have even further tomorrow. And we've been talking about this. But thank you for just recognizing the humanity in this decision.
And I guess that,
I do want to say before I call on you, or I'm sorry, are you?
yeah, I just
responding?
wanted to
Yes,
follow
yes.
up with what Dr. Jenkins has said. I just want to be clear that I'm not looking for the long-term structural, everything that we've discussed tonight to come back to us on Thursday. What I want to talk about specifically is this short-term issue that we have discussed and how we're going to move forward, how the administration suggests that we move forward. I think they've already given us their recommendation that we don't use fund balance for this. And I think I have to better understand if that recommendation stands or if there's going to be something else in the short term before we're able to deal with the structural, more long-term things that we want to talk about.
I guess I have a clarifying question. So you saying short term 1.4 on the 29th to vote for? Or you saying short term in terms of this? He's simply talking about bringing back.
Well, I guess I don't understand if what you're bringing back to us is a short-term solution or if it's a
Okay.
long-term solution.
Okay.
If it's a short-term solution for this budget, then I would be interested in knowing that on the 29th. I feel like you've stated a number of times how we move forward on this. And the board is asking for more. I guess if there's an analysis about what the more would look like, I guess I don't understand exactly what you are proposing to bring back to us, and that's why I'm looking forward to see what that is on Thursday.
Okay, so the memo will clarify that for everyone, what I'm expecting to happen on the 29th, what I would recommend, and then what I would let you know that we're going to be wrestling with in the next recommendation coming back to you.
I do want to say that I believe at this point, we've exhausted this conversation, given the information that we have available to us at this time. I also think that we have navigated how we will receive more information and the decisions we can make with the information we have at this time. So I'll ask for one more round of further conversation to hear from each board member. If folks don't have anything they want to add, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Board Member Nichols.
Thank you. This is it's just a clarification, just one more time. So we asked for this special meeting because there were a number of board members who were interested in seeing what hourly rate increases would look like beyond the 1.4. That's how we got here tonight.
Absolutely.
Okay, now we're here. We already know our administration's recommendation. It is to go forward with what we have in hand, which is the 1.4, and to not use fund balance. We got that. Ross, you've done an excellent job of laying out kind of all of that in the memos. What is not clear to me is what power do we hold at this time to say that we want this conversation to continue until we have an option that we are
Unlimited.
willing to vote on, in addition to the 1.4. Because I felt like that's why we were here tonight. We already knew we had the 1.4.
Yeah, so let's say that the administration doesn't bring us a recommendation above the 1.4, because that's like part of the conversation we're having tonight is how to work together to get to more, right?
Yeah.
That's sort of what we're defining. But let's say they came back to us and they said, we don't want to invest fund balance in staff, it's not sustainable. We don't have a plan to get us over this. I would say, Ross, the board would be able to amend the budget, and maybe this is a question for Sherry, but we would be able to amend the budget on the floor in October.
Yeah.
And use fund balance to increase hourly wages, right?
Correct.
Technically speaking, amendments on the floor can be done. A structural amendment like that would be a little bit unprecedented, but not unheard of. But structurally, I believe, yes, that's possible.
Okay, and
And I'm not saying, Ross, that is the route we want to take.
Exactly.
I am just saying that we have a breadth of options that are within the authority of the board. So that if collaborating with our administration becomes a barrier to achieving what the board would like to achieve, or the majority of the board would like to achieve in terms of our investment in the folks who work for us, the board has the authority to unilaterally make a decision.
Right, and we don't want to necessarily go that route. However, I think what is unclear to me as we're getting ready to adjourn is how does Ross know what else to further go explore? Like, is that coming from you, Dr. Jenkins?
Our conversation.
Okay, perfect. Then I'm good. Thank you.
Board Member Vandermeulen.
Okay, here's my issue. One, yes, we can put it on the floor. I don't like it, but we'll definitely do it. Two, I want to see the $5 and I want to see a way to do it. Three, I'm willing to work with the administration. I like you guys and I'm actually saying I'm willing to trust you with a huge step for me. However, I am willing, if need be, to agree to vote unilaterally if need be, because it may need to be done. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Board Member Vandermeulen. Board Member Simpkin, do you have any remarks before we adjourn?
I do not.
Board Member Gomez Schmidt, do you have any remarks before we adjourn?
I would just highly recommend that we work collaboratively. We do not leave a vote till the last minute as we're voting on the final budget in October. I would be very uncomfortable with that, and I do not think that is a good route to go. So I look forward to the work we have ahead of us here.
Dr. Jenkins, I want to thank you for the additional work that you're doing to support the board and our staff in this conversation. I know that this is a tremendous amount of work for you and your team. Ross, I want to thank you for really making us aware at the end of the borrowing implications of the decisions we may make. I think that is something that is easy to let fall off of our radar. And so thank you for your steadfast focus on making sure that we are making decisions that are pragmatic and well-informed. And I think, the overwhelming sense I have walking away from this conversation is that every single member of this board deeply values the people who work for this district and the students that they serve. And we are, doing everything within our power to make the greatest possible investment in the folks who work for us. And so for that, I'm incredibly grateful. And I hope that this conversation continues to be collaborative and proactive and center, the folks who work for us and our young people as we have this conversation. And with that said, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thanks so much, y'all.